In the sprawling, unforgiving concrete landscape of New York City, certain names are whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence. They are the names of men who build empires not from brick and mortar, but from violence, loyalty, and the unwritten codes of the street. Latique Johnson, a Bronx native known by a litany of aliases including Brim, Straight to Business and Boss Dog, is one such name. By the time he reached his early 40s, he had ascended to a position of near mythical status within the city's gang culture, earning the title of Godfather of the Bloodhound Brims, a notorious and widely feared subset of the National Bloods gang. His story is not one of a sudden rise but a slow, calculated climb through the ranks of criminality, marked by a ruthlessness that would become his signature. Johnson's journey into the criminal underworld began long before he founded his own powerful faction. His early life was a primer in the harsh realities of street justice and survival, culminating in a series of felony convictions that would both define and enable his future reign. His criminal record reads like a grim catalog of urban violence: first-degree manslaughter, second-degree attempted murder, and promoting prison contraband. These were not the actions of a low-level hustler, but of a man who understood that power in his world was seized through intimidation and bloodshed. Each stint in prison served as a brutal, advanced education, a place to forge alliances and sharpen the strategies that would one day allow him to command a legion of loyal followers from 1,000 miles away. The persona of Brim was meticulously crafted. He was not merely a gang leader, he was the capstone of a pyramid, the ultimate authority from whom all power flowed. His reputation was built on an unwavering demand for respect and a swift, merciless response to any perceived slight. This was a man who, according to court testimony, could order a man's face slashed for a minor infraction or dispatch a crew to commit murder with a single coded message. His leadership style was absolute, a blend of charismatic authority and terrifying unpredictability. To his followers, he was the embodiment of the gang's ethos, aggressive, disciplined, and utterly committed to its violent expansion. His ascent was not simply about personal ambition. It was about institutionalizing a brand of organized crime that could function with or without his physical presence. Johnson envisioned a gang that was more than a loose collection of street soldiers. He wanted a structured organization with a clear hierarchy, strict rules, and a steady stream of illicit income. This vision would ultimately lead him to create the Bloodhound Brims, a faction born within the very prison walls meant to contain him. He transformed his incarceration from a setback into an opportunity, using his time to recruit, strategize, and lay the groundwork for a criminal enterprise that would soon spill blood across the 5 boroughs and beyond, solidifying his dark legacy in the annals of New York City crime. The Bloodhound Brims were not born on a street corner or in a dimly lit back room. They were conceived and organized within the sterile, oppressive environment of the New York State prison system. It was here, while serving time for manslaughter and attempted murder, that Latique Johnson saw an opportunity. He was surrounded by a captive audience of disaffected violent men looking for structure, purpose, and power. Johnson provided all three. He leveraged his existing reputation and fearsome demeanor to begin recruiting members, establishing a new set of the Bloods that would operate under his exclusive command. The gang's very name, Bloodhound, evoked a sense of relentless predatory pursuit, a quality that would come to define their operations on the outside. Upon its inception, the gang was structured with a rigid, almost military-style hierarchy. Johnson, as Godfather or Boss Dog, sat at the apex. Below him were his trusted lieutenants, who in turn oversaw regional leaders and street-level soldiers. This pyramid structure was designed for efficiency and control, allowing orders to be passed down the chain of command with precision, while insulating Johnson from direct involvement in day-to-day criminal acts. The rules were strict and unforgiving. Disrespect to a superior, failure to follow an order, or cooperation with law enforcement were all met with violent retribution, ranging from beatings and slashings to death. This internal discipline ensured loyalty and made the Brims a cohesive and formidable force. The gang's activities were diverse and ruthlessly executed, focused primarily on generating profit and expanding their territory. Their main revenue streams were narcotics trafficking and armed robbery. Crews of Bloodhound Brims established drug spots across New York City and Long Island, pushing crack cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl with brutal efficiency. They engaged in a campaign of violent robberies, targeting rival drug dealers and anyone perceived to have cash or valuables. The proceeds from these criminal ventures were not just for personal enrichment, a portion was funneled back up the hierarchy, with a significant share making its way directly into Johnson's prison commissary account, a modern-day tribute to a king in exile. This combination of a disciplined hierarchy and a diversified criminal portfolio allowed the Bloodhound Brims to rapidly expand their influence. They were not just another street gang, they were a sophisticated racketeering enterprise. Their reputation for extreme violence served as a powerful tool, intimidating rivals and ensuring that their territorial claims were respected. When disputes arose with other gangs like the rival G-Shine Blood set, the Brims responded with overwhelming force, launching retaliatory shootings and attacks designed to send a clear message. Under Johnson's remote guidance, the Bloodhound Brims became a dominant and feared presence, a testament to a criminal organization forged in the crucible of the prison system. Even after his transfer to a federal penitentiary in Victorville, California, over 2,700 miles from the streets his gang controlled, Latique Johnson's grip on the Bloodhound Brims never loosened. His incarceration was not a barrier to his command, it was merely a logistical challenge to be overcome. Johnson mastered the art of running a criminal empire by proxy, transforming his prison cell into a remote headquarters. He maintained constant, near-daily communication with his lieutenants on the outside, using contraband cell phones and coded language to direct the gang's intricate operations. His word remained law, and his orders, whether to approve a new member or to orchestrate a murder, were carried out without question. The methods Johnson employed were a blend of modern technology and old-school intimidation. He used social media as a tool for propaganda and recruitment, having his proxies post messages that urged violence against rivals and glorified the gang's exploits. These posts served to maintain his presence and reinforce his authority among the rank and file. Financially, he was just as involved. He ordered his top lieutenants like Umar Dallowberry and Josiah Loco Herbert to deposit the proceeds from drug sales and armed robberies directly into his prison commissary account. They used mobile payment services like Cash App and Zelle, turning illicit street cash into a digital lifeline that sustained his power and influence from behind the razor wire. Authorities later discovered that over $31,000 had been funneled to him in this manner. Discipline was enforced with the same ruthless efficiency as if he were standing on a street corner in the Bronx. Johnson monitored the actions of his subordinates closely, and any perceived failure or insubordination was dealt with swiftly. In one instance, he levied a fine against his Suffolk County leader, Octavius Rose, for not following his orders to the letter. This demonstrated to the entire organization that no one was beyond his reach or his judgment. Conversely, he rewarded violence and loyalty. Members who committed significant acts of violence, especially against rival gangs, were promoted within the hierarchy. This system of punishment and reward ensured that the gang's violent ethos remained intact, and that his soldiers were constantly motivated to prove their worth. This ability to project power across a continent speaks volumes about the structure Johnson had built and the cult of personality he had cultivated. He was more than a leader, he was an icon, a symbol of defiance and power to his followers. His continued command of the Bloodhound Brims, while in maximum security federal custody, represents a chilling evolution in organized crime. It demonstrated that physical imprisonment is no longer sufficient to dismantle a deeply entrenched gang hierarchy. By leveraging technology and a network of loyal proxies, Latique Brim Johnson proved that the long arm of the law could be matched, for a time, by the long reach of a determined and diabolical gang godfather. By the late 2010s, the violent reign of Latique Johnson and the Bloodhound Brims had drawn the full, unblinking attention of federal law enforcement. The gang's brazen activities, the drug trafficking, the shootings, the robberies, were too loud and too bloody to ignore. Federal prosecutors began to build a massive case against Johnson, not for a single crime, but for his role as the leader of a continuing criminal enterprise. They employed the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, a powerful legal tool designed to dismantle organized crime from the top down. The goal was not just to punish Johnson for his individual actions, but to hold him accountable for a pattern of racketeering that included every violent act committed by his soldiers under his command. The 2018 federal trial laid bare the inner workings of the Bloodhound Brims. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence meticulously gathered over years of investigation. This included wiretapped phone conversations filled with coded language, testimony from law enforcement officers who had investigated the gang's crimes, and physical evidence linking the Brims to narcotics and firearms. But the cornerstone of their case was the testimony of former gang members who had decided to cooperate. These insiders provided a detailed roadmap of the gang's hierarchy, its brutal rules, and most importantly, Johnson's direct role in ordering specific acts of violence. They painted a picture of a leader who was intimately involved in the gang's affairs, a micromanager of mayhem. The charges against Johnson were severe and sweeping. He was indicted for racketeering conspiracy, attempted murder in aid of racketeering, narcotics trafficking, and various firearms offenses. Prosecutors argued that as the Godfather, he was the architect of the gang's violent campaign. They presented evidence that Johnson personally ordered the shooting of a rival gang member and the slashing of one of his own men for showing disrespect. The jury was faced with a narrative of a man who wielded absolute power and used it to fuel a cycle of bloodshed for profit and prestige. The defense attempted to portray the witnesses as unreliable criminals looking for lenient sentences, but their detailed, corroborating accounts proved too powerful to dismiss. In 2019, the jury delivered its verdict, guilty on all major counts. The conviction was a decisive victory for law enforcement and a crushing blow to the Bloodhound Brims. Latique Johnson was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison, a term that was meant to permanently remove him from his throne. The court recognized him not just as a participant in crime, but as its primary engine. The RICO conviction affirmed that a leader can be held responsible for the actions of their entire organization. For a time it seemed as though the story of Brim was over, that the Godfather had finally been neutralized. But even from a high-security facility in California, Johnson's influence was far from extinguished. Even with Latique Johnson behind federal bars, the machine he built continued to churn, its gears lubricated with blood. Under his remote direction, the Bloodhound Brims embarked on a new campaign to establish dominance, this time setting their sights on Long Island. The suburbs of Nassau and Suffolk counties became the new frontier for the gang's violent expansion. The catalyst for a particularly vicious spree of violence was the death of Alante Ship, a member of the rival G. Shine Blood set in August 2021. His killing ignited a brutal gang war, and Johnson, from his cell in California, gave the order to retaliate. The Brims were to show no mercy and to firmly establish their territory. What followed was a methodical and terrifying series of attacks. On August 23, 2021, just days after Ship's death, a crew of Bloodhound Brims, acting on orders from the top, drove to a rival's home and unleashed a volley of gunfire into the residence. This was not a random act of rage, but a calculated message of intimidation, a declaration that any aggression against the Brims would be met with disproportionate force. This incident set the tone for the months to come, as shootings and armed robberies became commonplace in neighborhoods unaccustomed to such overt gang warfare. The violence was strategic, designed to dismantle the G-Shine's operations and sow fear throughout the community. The gang's criminal activities on Long Island were, honestly, bold and varied. In May 2023, members lured a marijuana dealer to a secluded location under the pretense of a sale. Once he arrived, they shot him in the back and robbed him, a cold-blooded assertion of their control over the local drug trade. Another high-profile incident occurred on July 1, 2023, when Octavius Rose, Johnson's hand-picked leader for Suffolk County, allegedly opened fire at the Bays Bar and Grill in Hampton Bays. These acts demonstrated the gang's brazen disregard for public safety and their commitment to using violence as their primary business tool. Each shooting and robbery was a statement, reinforcing their claim to the territory. This wave of violence was not just a chaotic rampage, it was an orchestrated campaign directed by Johnson and executed by his lieutenants. Leaders like Rose were responsible for organizing meetings, collecting dues from members, and ensuring that Johnson's orders were followed. When leaders were arrested, new ones were promoted, often as a reward for their willingness to commit violent acts. The terror on Long Island was a direct extension of Johnson's will, a clear and chilling demonstration that his influence transcended prison walls. The suburban dream for many residents was turning into a waking nightmare, courtesy of the Bloodhound Brims. The brutal calculus of gang warfare often claims victims who have no part in the conflict. On April 1, 2023, this horrifying reality struck the community of Hempstead, Long Island, with breathtaking cruelty. Kimberly Midget, a 44-year-old elementary school teacher and beloved mother, was driving her car with her 10-year-old daughter in the back seat. She was a woman dedicated to educating children, completely unconnected to the violent underworld that was about to intersect with her life in the most tragic way possible. Her path crossed with that of a stolen car carrying several members of the Bloodhound Brims, who were out hunting for a rival they believed was an informant. In a catastrophic case of mistaken identity, the gang members targeted Kimberly Midget's vehicle. Without warning, they opened fire, riddling the car with bullets. One of those bullets struck Midget in the head, killing her instantly. Her young daughter in the back seat was physically unharmed, but was left to witness the horrific, sudden death of her mother. The intended target was nowhere near the scene. Midget was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, an innocent casualty in a war she didn't know was being fought. Her murder sent a shockwave of grief and outrage through the community, highlighting the indiscriminate nature of the gang's violence. The investigation into her senseless killing quickly pointed toward the Bloodhound Brims. Law enforcement identified the shooters as gang members who were actively working to solidify their turf and eliminate their enemies. Umar Dallo Berry, one of Johnson's key lieutenants responsible for funneling money to his prison account, was charged with her murder, along with a 16-year-old accomplice. The evidence suggested that these individuals had been promoted within the gang's hierarchy precisely for their willingness to commit such heinous acts. Midget's death was not just a tragic mistake, it was the direct result of a gang culture that rewarded bloodshed and operated with a callous indifference to human life. The murder of Kimberly Midget became a symbol of the devastating impact of the Bloodhound Brims' reign. It was a stark reminder that the gang's feuds were not contained to the criminal world, but spilled out onto quiet suburban streets, claiming the lives of innocent people. For law enforcement and prosecutors, her death added a new level of urgency to their efforts to dismantle the gang. It was no longer just about stopping drug trafficking or robberies, it was about preventing another family from being shattered by a stray bullet fired in a war waged by men following orders from a prison cell hundreds of miles away. In the closed world of street gangs, the code of silence, or omerta, is sacred. Snitching is considered the ultimate betrayal, an offense often punishable by death. Yet, in the federal trial against Latique Johnson, this powerful code was shattered by one of his own. Thomas Morton, a former high-ranking Bloodhound Brim known as 10,000 or 10 Stack, made the perilous decision to turn against his leader and cooperate with the government. His testimony would become the linchpin of the prosecution's case, providing a stunning first-hand account of Johnson's absolute authority and direct involvement in violent crimes. Morton's words brought the inner sanctum of the Brims into the glaring light of a federal courtroom. Taking the witness stand, Morton methodically dismantled the persona Johnson had carefully constructed. He testified that Johnson was, without question, the godfather of the Bloodhound Brims, and that his orders were to be followed without hesitation. Morton told the jury that Johnson had personally ordered him to carry out the shooting of a rival gang member. This was not a vague suggestion or a general directive for violence. It was a specific command from the man at the top. Morton's account transformed Johnson from a distant symbolic leader into a hands-on manager of attempted murder, directly implicating him in the very acts the RICO statute was designed to prosecute. Morton's revelations did not stop there. He provided chilling details about the gang's internal system of justice, all of which was dictated by Johnson. He recounted an incident where Johnson, enraged by a perceived sign of disrespect from another gang member, ordered the man to be slashed in the face. This testimony illustrated the culture of fear and unwavering obedience that Johnson cultivated. It showed that his power was absolute, extending even to the right to permanently disfigure his own followers for minor infractions. Morton and other cooperating witnesses corroborated these accounts, painting a consistent and damning picture of Johnson's leadership style. The decision for a man like Thomas Morton to testify against a figure like Latique Johnson is fraught with immense personal risk. Witnesses in gang trials often face threats against themselves and their families, living the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders. Morton's cooperation was likely born from a combination of self-preservation, a chance at a reduced sentence, and perhaps a desire to break free from the cycle of violence he had been a part of. Whatever his motivations, his testimony was a powerful demonstration that even the most fortified walls of silence can crumble. He gave prosecutors the irrefutable evidence they needed to prove that LeBrim was not just a member of a racketeering enterprise, He was its creator, its CEO, and its king. Just when it seemed Latique Johnson's story was concluded by a 30-year federal sentence, law enforcement delivered a stunning epilogue. On February 15, 2024, the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office unsealed a massive 103-count indictment against 31 members and associates of the Bloodhound Brims. This was the culmination of a years-long multi-agency investigation led by the Riverhead Town Police that involved over 100 search warrants and painstakingly pieced together a mosaic of gang violence. The indictment covered 34 separate violent incidents, including murder, 18 shootings, and multiple armed robberies that had terrorized Long Island communities between 2021 and 2023. At the center of this new web of charges was a familiar name, Latique Brims Johnson. Despite being incarcerated in California, Johnson was named as the conspiracy's mastermind. The new indictment charged him with first-degree conspiracy and 2 counts of fourth-degree conspiracy for directing the gang's violent campaign on Long Island from his federal prison cell. Prosecutors alleged that he was the unseen hand guiding the carnage, using contraband phones and coded messages to order his lieutenants to establish geographic dominance through bloodshed. The investigation revealed that Johnson had not been sidelined by his imprisonment. He had simply adapted, continuing to run his empire with the same authority he wielded on the streets. This new case was a testament to his unyielding grip on the organization. The evidence gathered by law enforcement was extensive. Investigators had intercepted communications, tracked financial transactions flowing into Johnson's commissary account, and built cases around specific acts of violence, including the tragic murder of Kimberly Midget. The indictment detailed how Johnson not only ordered the violence but also managed the gang's internal affairs, promoting members who followed his deadly orders and punishing those who did not. The operation was a clear signal to gangs that a leader's physical removal from the community does not necessarily end their criminal influence, and law enforcement was evolving its tactics to address this new reality of remote-controlled crime. On April 26, 2024, Latique Johnson was flown from California to New York and arraigned in a Suffolk County courtroom. Dressed in a yellow prison jumpsuit, he pleaded not guilty to the new conspiracy charges. The judge set bail at a staggering $5 million, a figure rendered moot by his existing 30-year federal sentence. The arraignment marked a new chapter in the relentless legal battle to dismantle the Bloodhound Brims. It showed that even after a major federal conviction, the fight was not over. Johnson's empire had struck back from behind bars, and now the law was striking back with equal force, determined to hold the Godfather accountable for every crime committed in his name. The sprawling saga of Latique Brims Johnson is more than just the story of one man's rise and fall. It is a stark illustration of the evolving nature of gang crime in the 21st century. His ability to found, build, and meticulously control a violent criminal enterprise like the Bloodhound Brims, first from a state prison and then from a federal penitentiary thousands of miles away, has rewritten the rules of engagement for law enforcement. Johnson's case demonstrates that physical incarceration, once considered the ultimate tool for neutralizing a kingpin, is no longer a guaranteed solution. In an era of contraband smartphones, encrypted messaging apps, and digital payment services, a prison cell can become a corner office for a remote CEO of crime. The legacy of Brims serves as a critical case study for police and prosecutors across the country. It highlights the necessity of not only arresting and convicting gang leaders but also actively dismantling their communication networks and financial lifelines. The discovery of over $31,000 funneled into Johnson's commissary account underscores the importance of monitoring financial flows, even within the prison system. Law enforcement agencies are now forced to become as technologically adept as the criminals they pursue, using sophisticated surveillance and financial tracking to sever the lines of command that allow leaders like Johnson to project their power beyond the prison walls. The fight against organized crime has firmly moved into the digital realm. For the communities terrorized by the Bloodhound Brims, the impact is deep and lasting. The murder of Kimberly Midget, an innocent schoolteacher, is a permanent scar, a tragic reminder of the indiscriminate cost of gang warfare. Johnson's story reveals how territorial disputes, once confined to specific urban neighborhoods, can spill into quiet suburbs, shattering the illusion of safety. The cycle of retaliatory violence he orchestrated from his cell created an atmosphere of fear that lingers long after the arrests have been made. Rebuilding trust and a sense of security in these communities is a long and arduous process, one that requires more than just successful prosecutions. Ultimately, the fall of Latique Johnson offers a cautionary tale. It shows the immense power of a charismatic and ruthless leader to command loyalty and inspire violence, but it also reveals the inherent vulnerabilities of such an empire. The testimony of insiders like Thomas Morton proves that even the most feared leaders are susceptible to betrayal when the pressure of the law becomes overwhelming. While Johnson's reign may be effectively over, his methods have provided a blueprint for a new generation of gang leaders. His legacy is a challenge to the justice system to remain vigilant, adaptive, and relentless in its pursuit of those who believe they can rule an empire of crime from the shadows of a prison cell.